The unexpected guardian. The eastern Himalayas weren't kind to outsiders. Mira Khatri knew this better than most as she hiked the familiar trail back to her research station, the setting sun painting the snow-capped peaks in hues of amber and gold. 6 months into her 2-year assignment studying endangered snow leopards, she'd grown accustomed to the isolation, the biting winds, and the overwhelming silence that clung to these mountains like morning mist. "Just you and me tonight, old girl," she murmured to herself, adjusting the weight of her backpack. Her research partner had left 2 days ago, some family emergency that required immediate evacuation. The replacement wouldn't arrive for another week, assuming the weather cooperated. The first sign that something was wrong came as a vibration beneath her boots, subtle at first, like the distant rumble of an avalanche, then building until the ground itself seemed to tremble. Mira froze, gripping her walking stick as her eyes scanned the darkening slopes around her. That's when she saw it, a brilliant streak of light carving through the twilight sky, trailing fire and smoke as it descended at an impossible angle. Not a meteor. Too controlled. Too deliberate. "What the hell?" she whispered, watching as the object disappeared behind a nearby ridge. The impact came seconds later, not the earth-shattering explosion she expected, but a muffled thud followed by an eerie silence. Common sense told her to return to the safety of her station and radio it in. Protocol demanded she document the coordinates and wait for authorities. But 28 years of life had taught Mira Khatri that the most important moments often arrived disguised as choices that seemed foolish at the time. She adjusted her headlamp and changed course. The crash site wasn't difficult to find, a long furrow carved into the mountainside, ending at a metallic object half buried in rock and soil. Steam hissed from its surface, melting the patches of snow around it. As Mira approached cautiously, the object's true nature became clear. It was a vessel, not of human design. Roughly the size of a small bus, its hull gleamed with an iridescent sheen that seemed to shift colors under her headlamp. No visible windows or doors, just a seamless, elegant curve broken only by what appeared to be a jagged rupture near one end. Mira's heart hammered in her chest as she documented everything with the camera around her neck. Her hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the realization that she was standing before something that would rewrite human history. A sound stopped her, faint but distinct, a keening, high-pitched whine coming from inside the vessel. Then another, slightly different in pitch. Her breath caught as a section of the hull suddenly shifted, plates rearranging themselves to form an opening. "Hello," she called out, immediately feeling foolish. What was she expecting? Aliens who conveniently spoke English? The answer came in the form of movement within the darkness of the opening. Mira stepped back, heart racing, as 3 small figures emerged. They weren't much larger than human children, perhaps the size of 10-year-olds, but the resemblance ended there. Their bodies were slender with 4 multi-jointed limbs, covered in what appeared to be overlapping plates that shimmered like opals. Their faces held no features she could recognize as eyes or mouths, just a complex arrangement of sensory organs that pulsed with gentle bioluminescence. One was clearly injured, leaning heavily against its companions, a dark fluid seeping from between its plates. Mira stood transfixed, camera forgotten in her hands. The aliens, because what else could they be, seemed equally surprised, their bodies emitting rapidly changing patterns of light. The injured one suddenly collapsed, its companions emitting distressed flashes of crimson and amber. Without thinking, Mira rushed forward, medical training overriding her fear. "It's okay," she soothed, knowing they couldn't understand her words, but hoping her tone might convey her intentions. "I'm going to help." Up close, she could see the aliens were trembling. From fear, cold, or shock, she couldn't tell. The injured one's plates had separated at what seemed to be a joint, revealing delicate tissues beneath. The wound itself wasn't unlike injuries she treated on mammals, a deep laceration that was bleeding steadily. Mira removed her backpack and pulled out her first aid kit. "I don't know if human medicine will help you," she admitted softly, "but we've got to try something." To her surprise, one of the uninjured aliens extended a limb toward her medical kit, then touched its companion's wound, and finally pressed against its own head in a gesture that seemed unmistakable even across species. It understood she wanted to help. For the next hour, as darkness fully claimed the mountains, Mira worked by headlamp to treat the alien's injury. The bleeding substance wasn't quite blood, more viscous and slightly luminescent, but it responded to pressure and basic wound care techniques. She used gauze, antiseptic, and finally a pressure bandage to stabilize the injury. Throughout the process, the aliens communicated through patterns of light and occasional touches to each other, and cautiously to her. There was intelligence in those interactions, complex, sophisticated intelligence. "You can't stay here," Mira said finally, surveying her handiwork. "It's too cold, and that ship doesn't look habitable." She gestured toward the research station, visible as a distant pinprick of light down the mountain. "I have shelter, food, heat." The uninjured aliens conferred through a rapid exchange of light patterns. One approached her, extending both front limbs in a gesture that somehow conveyed both vulnerability and trust. Mira hesitated only briefly before taking them in her own hands. They were warm to the touch and vibrated slightly, like purring cats. Decision made, she fashioned a makeshift stretcher from her emergency gear and loaded the injured alien onto it. The two others helped, seeming to understand the concept immediately. As they began the careful descent toward the research station, Mira's satellite phone chimed. The screen displayed a message from her supervisor. "Unite in TIFI atmospheric ENTRI DETCTED in your region. Government teams dispatched. Confirm any UNUSULSIGTINGs immediately." Mira looked at the three aliens, lost, injured, frightened beings who had entrusted their lives to her, then at the message again. With a deep breath, she typed her response. "Negative. Nothing unusual to report." She powered down the phone and slipped it into her pocket. Whatever these beings were, whatever had brought them to Earth, one thing was clear. They needed protection, not interrogation, not dissection. "Come on," she said to her new companions, managing a smile despite her racing thoughts. "Let's get you somewhere safe." The research station was a modest structure, 3 rooms designed for function rather than comfort, with solar panels and a backup generator providing the basic necessities. Mira settled the injured alien on her bed, noting with relief that its bioluminescence had stabilized into a steady azure glow that she hoped indicated improvement. The other two explored the cabin with methodical curiosity, their plates shifting subtly as they examined human objects. One seemed particularly fascinated by Mira's collection of wildlife photographs, extending sensory appendages toward the images of snow leopards, red pandas, and Himalayan bears. "That's my work," Mira explained, watching as the alien traced the outline of a leopard cub. "I study and protect endangered species." She laughed softly at the irony. "I guess you 3 are the most endangered species I've ever encountered." Communication proved both challenging and surprisingly intuitive. The aliens couldn't reproduce human speech, but they quickly grasped the connection between objects and the words Mira used to identify them. For their part, they communicated through complex light patterns that Mira began to recognize had consistent meanings: danger, curiosity, gratitude. By morning, Mira had learned they were indeed juveniles, something equivalent to adolescence in human terms. Their vessel was a small exploratory craft that had malfunctioned after encountering an unexpected solar flare. The adult crew of their main ship, somewhere in orbit beyond Earth's detection capabilities, would be searching for them. "How long do you think before they find you?" Mira asked, knowing she wouldn't understand the precise answer, but hoping to gauge if this was a matter of hours or days. The response came as a series of slow, pulsing lights that somehow conveyed uncertainty and concern. "Not soon, then." Her satellite phone chimed again, this time with a direct call. Mira answered cautiously. Katri, came the clipped voice of Colonel Wyzong, her project's military liaison. We have reports of an unidentified object entering Earth's atmosphere near your position last night. I didn't see anything unusual, Colonel. Mira replied, watching as the aliens dimmed their bioluminescence in response to her sudden tension. Our satellites tell a different story. We've tracked the object to within 2 kilometers of your station. Mira swallowed hard. The weather was poor last night. Limited visibility. A team is en route to your position now. ETA 14 hours, weather permitting. You are to provide full assistance in locating the object. Understood, Mira replied, her mind racing. Anything else I should know? There was a pause. The object is of significant national security interest. Any contact should be reported immediately. Do not approach or attempt interaction. After ending the call, Mira sank into a chair, the 3 aliens watching her with what she could only interpret as concern. 14 hours. Maybe less if the weather improved. Not enough time for their people to find them. They're coming for you, she said simply, knowing they couldn't understand her words, but hoping they might sense her meaning. And I don't think they're planning a welcome party. The injured alien had recovered enough to join its companions. Together, they emitted a synchronized pattern of lights that Mira hadn't seen before, a solemn, steady rhythm that made her think of determination, or perhaps resignation. Mira looked at her equipment, her research, the life she built over years of hard work. Then she looked at the 3 beings who had fallen from the sky into her care. No, she said firmly, standing up. This isn't how first contact should happen. Not with fear and weapons and government agents. She began gathering essentials: food, medical supplies, navigation equipment. The aliens watched her, their lights pulsing with curiosity. We're leaving, Mira explained, gesturing to the mountains beyond the station. There's an old monastery about 20 kilometers from here. My friend Tenzin lives there. He's eccentric enough that 3 aliens won't even faze him. As she packed, Mira caught sight of herself in the small mirror above her sink. The face that looked back at her was changed somehow, more resolved, more certain than she'd ever seen it. For the first time in her life, Mira Katri knew exactly who she was and what she stood for. Come on, she said to her alien companions, shouldering her pack and opening the door to the crisp mountain dawn. Let's make history the right way. The cosmic bargain. The ancient monastery clung to the mountainside like a weathered hand gripping stone, a testament to human determination that had withstood centuries of Himalayan winters. As Mira led her alien companions through its wooden gates, the first rays of dawn illuminated prayer flags fluttering in the wind. Tenzin, she called out, her voice echoing in the courtyard. It's Mira. I need your help. The old monk emerged from the main temple, his lined face registering first surprise, then understanding as he took in the 3 luminescent beings beside her. He didn't gasp or back away, just nodded as if alien visitors were an expected inconvenience rather than an earth-shattering event. The government people are looking for them, Mira explained breathlessly. They're just children, Tenzin. I couldn't. Tenzin raised a hand, silencing her. The universe sends us precisely what we need to test our compassion, he said simply. Come inside before the sun reveals too much. The monastery's inner sanctum was warm and dimly lit, perfect for beings whose bodies emitted their own light. Tenzin showed no fear as he examined the injured alien, now recovering but still weakened. Remarkable, he murmured, watching as the creature's plates shifted to absorb the warmth from the room's small stove. They are far from home. You don't seem surprised, Mira observed, accepting a cup of butter tea from the old monk. Tenzin smiled enigmatically. When you've meditated on the nature of consciousness for 60 years, the idea that it might take forms beyond human becomes less surprising. He gestured toward the aliens. They're afraid, but not of us specifically. Something else troubles them. Mira nodded. Their ship is damaged. They're stranded until their people find them. She rubbed her temples. And my government, probably several governments by now, are racing to capture them instead. For the next 3 days, the monastery became a sanctuary. Mira used her satellite phone sparingly, learning that multiple search teams were combing the mountains, their focus still on the crash site, but expanding outward methodically. It was only a matter of time. The aliens, meanwhile, grew stronger. The injured one recovered enough to join its companions in exploration of the monastery, forming an unlikely bond with Tenzin, who spent hours teaching them simple meditation postures which they adopted with what seemed like reverence. Communication evolved rapidly. The aliens began using a combination of light patterns and simple drawings to convey more complex ideas. They showed Mira images of their home, a water world orbiting a binary star system, and of their people, a spacefaring civilization that had been observing Earth from afar for decades. Why didn't they make contact before? Mira asked, watching as one alien sketched intricate symbols in a journal Tenzin had provided. The response came as a series of drawings depicting human history, wars, environmental destruction, nuclear weapons, followed by a simple image of a closed door with a question mark. They didn't think we were ready, Mira translated, understanding flooding through her. And maybe we weren't. On the 4th night, everything changed. Mira was awakened by a chorus of excited light patterns from the aliens. They led her outside to the monastery's highest observation point, pointing frantically at the night sky. At first, she saw nothing unusual among the familiar constellations. Then she noticed it, a star that moved, growing brighter by the minute. "Your people?" she asked. The aliens' bodies pulsed with an affirmative pattern. "They found you," Mira whispered, feelings of relief and loss tangling in her chest. But the aliens' light patterns shifted suddenly to alarm. One pointed down the mountain path, where distant headlights were snaking upward, multiple vehicles moving with purpose. The search teams, Mira realized with dread. They must have detected your ship's approach. Tenzin appeared beside her, face solemn in the starlight. "Two forces converge," he observed quietly. "One above, one below. What happens when they meet?" The alien ship grew larger in the sky, now clearly visible as a massive vessel at least 10 times the size of the original craft. Simultaneously, the convoy of military vehicles drew closer to the monastery, less than an hour away by Mira's estimation. "They'll capture them," Mira said, fear tightening her throat. "Or worse, they might interpret the alien ship as a threat and attack it." "What will you do?" Tenzin asked, his eyes reflecting starlight. Mira looked between the approaching ship and the military convoy, decision crystallizing with sudden clarity. "Something probably very stupid," she replied, already racing back into the monastery. Within minutes, she had gathered her gear and a powerful signal flare normally used for mountain rescues. The aliens followed her, their luminescence pulsing with questioning patterns. "I'm going to meet them," Mira explained, pointing to the approaching vehicles. "I'll try to make them understand you're not a threat, that this can be a peaceful first contact." The aliens conferred through rapid light exchanges, then one, the formerly injured one, approached and pressed something into Mira's hand. It was a small crystalline object that glowed with soft inner light. "What is this?" she asked. The alien pointed to the object, then to Mira's heart, and finally to the approaching ship in a gesture she somehow understood perfectly. "A token of trust," Tenzin translated from behind her. "Something to prove you speak for them." Mira nodded, carefully tucking the crystal into her breast pocket. "Tell your friends I'll do everything I can," she told the aliens, hoping they understood the gravity of her promise. "You may not return," Tenzin warned as she prepared to leave. Mira smiled tightly. Some things are worth the risk. She began her descent down the mountain path, using her headlamp sparingly to avoid detection for as long as possible. The alien ship now dominated the sky above, hovering silently over the region, its hull reflecting moonlight like a second sun. When she finally spotted the convoy, 5 military vehicles, and what appeared to be a mobile command center, Mira took a deep breath and ignited her signal flare. The crimson light illuminated the mountainside as she stepped into the middle of the path, arms raised. The lead vehicle screeched to a halt, floodlights immediately sweeping to pin her in their glare. Soldiers emerge, weapons raised. "This is a restricted area," a commanding voice shouted. "Identify yourself." "Dr. Mira Khatri, Wildlife Conservation Court," she replied steadily. "And I believe I have something you're looking for." Minutes later, she was escorted to the mobile command center, where Colonel Zhang awaited, his face a mask of controlled fury. "You deliberately missiled government forces during a national security operation," he stated flatly. "That's treason, Dr. Khatri." "With respect, Colonel, I was trying to prevent an interstellar incident," Mira replied, nodding upward toward the massive ship now visibly descending toward their position. "Those beings up there have technology beyond our comprehension. They could wipe us out if they wanted to." She leaned forward. "But they don't want to. They just want their children back." Zhang's expression faltered. "Children?" "The vessel that crashed contained 3 juvenile explorers," Mira explained quickly. "They're injured but safe. I've been protecting them." "Protecting them from us," Zhang observed coldly. "From uninformed first contact," Mira corrected. "From panic and military responses to a situation that requires diplomacy." The colonel studied her for a long moment, then gestured to a technician monitoring communications equipment. "What's the status of the object?" "Holding position at 3,000 meters, sir. No aggressive movements or energy signatures detected," the technician replied nervously. "But our systems are experiencing unusual interference." Mira reached into her pocket and withdrew the crystal the alien had given her. It pulsed steadily now, growing brighter by the second. "They're scanning us," she explained, "looking for their children and possibly assessing our intentions." Zhang eyed the crystal suspiciously. "What is that?" "A direct link to them," Mira said, not entirely certain but trusting her intuition. "Colonel, I can facilitate this contact peacefully. Let me bring the children to their people." "Absolutely not," Zhang snapped. "Those aliens are coming with us for study." "They're not specimens," Mira interrupted, anger flaring. "They're intelligent beings with rights and a civilization probably thousands of years beyond ours. How we handle this moment will determine humanity's place in whatever cosmic community exists out there." As if responding to her words, the crystal in her hand suddenly projected a holographic image, a 3-dimensional representation of the mountainside, with 2 distinct groups highlighted: the military convoy and the monastery where the alien children waited. "They know where their children are," Mira translated. "They're asking for permission to retrieve them." Zhang stared at the projection, the reality of the situation finally seeming to penetrate his military training. "How do we know they won't retaliate for the crash? For their injured young?" "Because they've had the power to do so from the moment they arrived," Mira pointed out gently. "Yet they wait, seeking understanding instead of vengeance." She met the colonel's eyes directly. "Isn't that exactly what we hope to find in the universe? Intelligence tempered with compassion." The command center fell silent save for the soft hum of equipment. Outside, the alien ship had descended further, now hovering just a few hundred meters above the mountain peak where the monastery perched. "What do you propose?" Zhang finally asked. "A gesture of peace," Mira replied. "Let me return their children with no conditions, no demands. Let this first official contact be based on trust." After what seemed an eternity, Zhang nodded sharply. "You have 1 hour, Dr. Khatri. If that ship makes any move we interpret as aggressive." "It won't," Mira promised, already heading for the door. The return journey to the monastery was a blur of adrenaline and purpose. When she arrived, breathless and triumphant, she found Tenzin and the 3 aliens waiting in the courtyard, all looking skyward at their approaching kinsman. They've agreed to a peaceful exchange, Mira explained quickly. But we need to move fast before someone gets nervous and does something stupid. The alien children's bodies pulsed with joy, rippling patterns of gold and azure that needed no translation. One by one, they approached Mira, pressing their limbs against her in gestures of gratitude and farewell. The last one, the one she had first treated, lingered longest, its sensory appendages brushing against her face in what felt unmistakably like a caress. It then produced a second crystal, larger than the first, and pressed it firmly into her hands. "What is this?" Mira asked. The alien's response came as a series of light patterns that somehow formed images in Mira's mind. Stars, pathways, connections. Understanding dawned slowly. "It's a key," she whispered. "A way to find you again." The alien's body pulsed with affirmation. As they made their way to the open ground behind the monastery, the great ship descended further, its hull opening to reveal a blinding white light. Silhouetted against the light were figures, adult versions of her alien companions, their bodies larger and more complex, but unmistakably the same species. Mira stood tall as military helicopters circled cautiously at a distance. Colonel Zhang had kept his word, maintaining surveillance but not interfering. The alien children moved toward their people, their bodies glowing brighter than Mira had ever seen. At the threshold between Earth and their vessel, the formerly injured one turned back, its body forming one final pattern of light that somehow translated directly into Mira's understanding. The universe remembers kindness. Then they were gone, drawn into the ship in a smooth motion that defied physics as Mira understood it. The vessel's hull sealed seamlessly, and it began to rise back toward the stars. But it didn't leave immediately. Instead, it hovered above the monastery, a beam of concentrated light suddenly extending downward to envelop Mira completely. She heard shouts of alarm from the military personnel who had followed her up the mountain, but she felt no fear, only a profound sense of communion as information flowed into her mind. Knowledge of stars and worlds beyond imagination. The history of a species that had wandered the cosmos for millennia. And an invitation, not just for her, but for humanity. When the light receded, Mira stood unchanged physically but transformed in essence. The crystal in her hand had merged with her somehow, its energy now a part of her cellular structure. "Dr. Katri." Colonel Zhang's voice broke through her reverie as he approached cautiously. "Are you injured?" Mira smiled, watching as the alien vessel accelerated upward, becoming once more just a point of light among stars. "No, Colonel. I'm better than I've ever been." "What did they do to you?" "They gave us a future," she replied simply. "They've extended an invitation for Earth to join a coalition of peaceful worlds. Once we're ready." "And who determines when we're ready?" Zhang asked skeptically. Mira touched her chest, where the crystal's energy now pulsed in harmony with her heartbeat. "I do," she said softly. "That's my gift. And my responsibility." In the days that followed, Mira's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. She became Earth's first officially recognized interstellar ambassador, working with a hastily assembled international committee to prepare humanity for eventual integration into the galactic community. The knowledge the aliens had imparted gave Earth a technological leap forward, particularly in medicine and sustainable energy, gifts carefully chosen to help rather than harm a species still struggling with its own violent tendencies. 1 year to the day after the encounter, Mira stood once more on the mountain peak beside Tenzin's monastery. The old monk joined her, offering a cup of butter tea as they watched the sunset. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "The burden they placed on you?" Mira smiled, feeling the warm pulse of alien technology that now lived within her, the key to humanity's cosmic future. "How can I regret being trusted with something so precious?" Tenzin nodded sagely. "The universe does indeed remember kindness," he observed. "And sometimes it repays in ways we never expected." As darkness fell, a single star seemed to pulse briefly brighter than the others. A greeting from distant friends, a promise of returns. Mira raised her cup in silent toast. In saving 3 lost children from another world, she had given humanity something far greater than technological advancement or diplomatic connections. She had given them proof that compassion transcended species, planets, and even the vast gulfs between stars. And in a universe of infinite possibilities, that might be the most valuable discovery of all.